Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dead to Rights, the podcast video for the crime genre industry. I'm your host, Donna Carrick. I'm pleased this week to bring you an interview with Thom Bennett, author of the Cass Gentry mystery series. And Thom has been writing for many years, but he was also involved in theater performance and production of theater performance for many years. So he knows how to bring a dramatic flair to his noir crime novels. So be sure to check him out. It's Thom Bennett, ThomBennett. And you can find his books at Amazon or other great e-retailers. So be sure to look him up. And it's the Cass Gentry mystery series. Before we get to our interview today, I'd like to let you know that submissions are now closed for A Grave Diagnosis, our Carrick Publishing crime anthology that is scheduled to be released in the fall of 2020. If you were able to get your submission in, thank you very much. And I'll be sure to get back to you just as soon as possible. If you were not, and if you missed the deadline, then I'm sorry about that. Hopefully we'll be able to see you in one of our new anthologies coming up in a couple of years. So we try to do them every other year. Now, before I bring Thom on, I want to also invite you, if you are a crime author, to send in a request to be interviewed on Dead to Rights. If you're someone who would like to widen your platform, I'd be happy to hear from you. Send me an email at carrickpublishing@rogers.com. And in the subject line, please say Interview Dead to Rights. I try to do these every week for a season, and we're right now in season 3. And we've converted from straight podcast to video podcast, as you can see, in order to widen our audience. So I'd be very happy to hear from you. Again, that is carrickpublishing@rogers.com. And in the subject line, say Interview Dead to Rights. Now, before I bring Thom on the line, I've promised to do a public service announcement related to COVID-19. So here we go. COVID-19, better known as coronavirus, has spread throughout the world. Information about children with this disease is limited, but they are known to have mild symptoms. Many organizations are responding accordingly depending on their area. It is best to stay home and away from others, especially when sick, and continue following healthy washing hands guidelines, covering mouth and nose, and not touching your face or high-touch surfaces. Clean and disinfect highly touched surfaces. For more information, please visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Thank you. And now I'm delighted to welcome Thom Bennett to Dead to Rights, the podcast video. How are you this morning, Thom?
I'm very well, Donna. Thank you for asking. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, the sun is shining. It's another beautiful day in COVID country. And I understand that you're trapped in the northern reaches. Is that right?
Well, it's, yes, we're near Huntsville, actually. I'm halfway between Huntsville and Rosso here in the wintertime, and I haven't moved to the cottage yet.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to have you here, and I'm glad we were able to make a connection, even though I know that your internet is kind of wonky, so we'll have to bear with it. Now, you have just completed a story for our upcoming anthology, A Grave Diagnosis. And what is the title of your story, Thom?
It's called The Empty Grave.
It's a really good story. I enjoyed reading it very much. Can you tell us a little bit about your protagonist?
Yes, the protagonist is named Cass Gentry. This is the second of the short stories that I've written about him. Actually, there are 2 novels out. I originally wrote the first novel, came out a few years ago, called The Death Merchants. And the sequel to it came out last fall, and it's entitled The Man with Hemingway's Face. It took me, between writing the 2 of them and overlapping editing and preparing the second novel, it took about 15 years for the 2 books.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. 15 years is a very long time. Now, have you shopped those books around? Have you looked for a publisher?
They've been published by Dark Porch Publishing, which is a small indie press,
Okay.
but they send them out to Amazon, and
Hmm.
Amazon has them, along with my other books, in their catalog. They've been
Okay.
selling there, plus I shop them around in some of the local bookstores. I haven't taken the time to really shop them as much as I should be. I'm too busy writing more books, but
But they're available on Amazon, and that's the big one. Now, what are the titles of the two novels?
the first novel is called The Death Merchants.
Hmm.
It takes place in the summer of 1952, or pardon me, 1959,
Hmm.
and it follows the adventures of our protagonist, Cass Gentry, who is a Canadian by birth. A little backstory on him: his family was born down in the southern Ontario area of Cambridge Galt. Um, Mother has a summer cottage up in Muskoka area. And Cass, when he was in high school, he wasn't doing too well. So his father, who was a fairly well-to-do industrialist, got him enrolled in a military academy in upstate New York.
Okay.
From there, he decided that he was going to stay in the States after he graduated from the military academy and do a degree at New York University. And after he finished that, Korean War came along and he enlisted as a Canadian, but in the American Army.
Okay. Okay. Oh,
Following that, he was honored. He also took some special ops training, worked in Washington for a short period of time, which he can't talk about. And then he opened up his own private detective agencies, and he lives and works out of Greenwich Village.
he sounds like a real all-around gumshoe noir character. Would that kind of describe him?
Pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. He's sensitive, but he's highly trained, and he's quite skilled, and
In the
he's
Death
also
Merchant,
a good sense of humor. Sorry?
in the Death Merchant, can you tell me a little bit about your villain?
Well, there's the villain and there's the villain.
Uh,
um, the um, the villain of this particular story is the son of a New Jersey gangster, and he gets a hate on for Gentry because he was humiliated and beaten in a poker game one night, and he sends thugs around to teach Gentry a lesson, but Gentry turns the tables on him, so it becomes a hate revenge type of situation from there on. However, the main story follows Gentry as he goes back to Canada to work on a murder that takes place in the Muskoka area at a summer theater.
mhm.
And an ex-girlfriend turns out to be the artistic director of the theater, and she feels like she's going to be incriminated. So he goes to work. Meanwhile, the subplot of the villain is going to try to follow him with some of his thugs.
Okay. Okay. And you're very familiar with the Muskoka region. Can you tell our listeners who may not be familiar with it a little bit about Muskoka?
Well, it's a cottage country. It's right in the middle of it is Lake Joseph and Lake Rosso. Um, Very expensive real estate country, upmarket vacationers,
Hmm.
and
People like Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell.
exactly, yes, Goldie Hawn and her husband, and a lot of that same gang that was in the TV series Schitt's Creek that just finished after 5 years, and um, and yes, met a few of them because I ran a summer theater over there,
Oh,
and they came to the summer theater, and they also came over to the other theater I ran in the Perry Sound area of
that
Rainbow
sounds
Theater.
like a lot of fun running a theater. How many years did you do that for?
Well, I did that concurrently with my job as a professional educator. I did the theater for 20 years. It was summer theater, and I could do that and work, you know, in the winter time at the same time in my own time, developing that. And it was professional summer stock.
Mm-hmm.
We had professional actors. I had professional directors, and technicians, set designers, and so on. And as you asked, it lasted for 20 years between the two theaters.
Wow, wow, that's a pretty long run. What were some of your favorite plays that you hosted?
Well, I directed the thrillers myself, and we did a lot of Peter Colley's works. I'll Be Back Before Midnight and Mark of Cain and so on. In fact, Peter came and seen a few of the shows himself, and got to know him quite well. At the same time, I was writing plays,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a few of my plays published. My most popular one is called Dark Rituals, which was published by Samuel French,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of them are available through Playwrights Guild of Canada. However, the summer theater, you asked about my favorite plays. I love the British farces. I had a very talented friend, or we became friends through the theater experience. He had studied at Birmingham Rep in England as an actor, and he came back to Canada and um, was the artistic director of several summer theaters. And I was lucky enough to get him to direct plays for me as well. And he did the British farces and some of the musicals, and we hired out the other directors for the musicals.
Wow, wow, that's pretty impressive, Tom, really. And in terms of your writing, what are you working on now?
I just finished a collection of short stories, and a novella headlining the collection called Promises. The book itself is called Promises and Other White Lies,
Mm-hmm.
and it features um, uh, a collection of other stories. It has another Cass Gentry story,
Mm-hmm.
along with his new sidekick, his girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
who is, strangely enough, the daughter of the gangster, not the nasty gangster, but the nasty gangster's father, Frank Palladino.
Okay.
I'm writing two sets of stories right now. Or three if you count the short stories. The Cass Gentry mysteries, and which include um, the more serious um, New York mobs, and I'm also writing a comedy series in the same lines as Damon Runyon,
Series,
Damon Runyon-esque comedies.
brave you. Comedy is so hard. Now, this must be your association with Melody Campbell.
Well, I I met her online, or at least on the phone, when she was with the, um, the mystery company. Um, I was going to say Playwrights Guild, but I'm sorry, it just escapes me offhand. I'm a member, for goodness sake. Um, anyways, I met her over the phone, and we became friends through the miracle of the internet, and
Mhm.
we've been exchanging, um, you know, stories back and forth, ideas, and we have a bit in common. We both love writing. She's exceptionally successful, as you know,
Mhm.
and I'm a novice in comparison. But we also enjoy old movies and music and so on.
Well, Melody's got just an incredible sense of humor, so I'm sure that's another connecting point between the two of you. She's really a very funny lady. And so you actually took a writing course, and I think did you know Melody through that?
No, actually not. No.
Oh, okay, okay. I wondered if that's how you'd met. Sorry, just jumping the gun there because I know that she has she has a huge network through that, you know.
No, it was actually through Crime Writers of Canada, which I
Oh,
suddenly remember.
okay, that makes more sense then, yes. Now, the humor that you're working on, can you give me some titles of something that you've got going?
Well, it's a series of short stories again. The protagonist is a friend of Frank Palladino, the gangster. They grew up together as kids, and the protagonist, his name is Charlie Silverman. And Charlie is actually a Broadway producer. He produces plays often on Broadway. And the set of stories are the Uncle Charlie stories. Um, one of them was published in Mystery Weekly magazine called the Passport or Passport Blues as the new title. And I've written several others. The Gangster's Problem um, is the second one in that series. Another one called The Wingding Kid.
What was that last one?
The Wingding Kid. And the most recent one is called The Day the Chickens Flew. So they're all comedies, and they're all, as they say, in the Damon Runyon-esque type. Um,
They're fantastic titles. I just love them. The Passport Blues, The Wingding Kid, what was the other one that you mentioned?
The Day the Chickens Flew.
The Day the Chickens Flew. These are wonderful titles. I really like them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
everybody look for Thomas Bennett on Amazon. And Tom, you're bringing a lot of your theatrical knowledge and sense of drama to the writing. I can tell this from your story, The Empty Grave, which is going to be in a grave diagnosis. So it's got a great tie-in title as well. But there's just a great sense of drama from scene to scene that I notice. And that's got to come from your theatrical background.
Well, it sure helps. In fact, the latest Charlie Silverman story, Charlie actually goes to Cass Gentry. He finds out about Cass as a good detective through the Palladino mob connection, because, as they say, Cass is dating Frank Palladino's daughter, Eleanor. And so Charlie goes to Cass to solve a problem that he's having in the theater. And Eleanor comes along. This is the first time that we introduce Eleanor as a partner of Cass Gentry's, although we do meet her in the second novel, the Man with Hemingway's Face, which is a very serious mystery thriller. And we find in that novel that she's got some extremely interesting skills. She's really her father's daughter. So,
Okay.
so anyway, so that's the latest story. It's actually written from the viewpoint of Cass Gentry. I use his voice rather than Uncle Charlie's voice, but you can see there's a crossover between the two types of stories: the Uncle Charlie stories, the Cass Gentry stories.
Yes, 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 you can see
One
that.
was called Too Many Love Letters. So it will also be in my new.
Country. He's a great character. And again, I love the sense of drama from scene to scene. And it's wonderful that you're able to get these stories consolidated in this way and get them out there. I guess, it's hard for a lot of people. What would you recommend for new writers who are just getting into trying to prepare novels, trying to prepare short story collections? Do you have any tips of any kind, a wide, broad, any tip that you can give new writers?
Well, the first and foremost one is you've got to be a reader.
Yes.
They should be reading. They should be reading the genre that they're writing in. I was lucky when I was a kid. My parents started me on Classics Illustrated, so I got a good grounding in classic novels. So that when I got a little older, I actually started reading the real novels. But at the same time, I was also reading Hardy Boy books, which got me interested in mystery writing.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was 13, I graduated to the Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer novels.
Mhm.
And from there on, I was influenced by other writers like Elmer Leonard and John D. MacDonald and Ian Rankin.
Mhm.
So that would be first and foremost recommendation is you've got to be a reader. You've got to see
It's
what's,
never too
you know,
late. It's never too late to pick that habit up and make it consistent. Most of us who write uh, really consider ourselves writers. We were avid readers as children, but it's never too late to create a new habit or to have a new beginning. If you were not an avid reader as a child, pick up a book in your favorite genre, something that you like to watch on TV, for example, that you think will capture your interest. And just make it a habit to read a little bit every day. I know in today's world, it's very difficult to have that kind of focus on any one activity. But I really recommend, even before bed or in the morning when you first get up, it's like brushing your teeth at one end of the day or the other, or both. Um, do a little reading, even if it's just a few pages, even if that's all you've got the time or the energy for after your busy day. But I don't think you can be a good writer without reading. I really, truly don't. I think you've chosen the best tip you could possibly give, Thom, and I thank you for doing it.
well,
Because
thank you. Thank you.
talk about the skills needed. We talk about the passion needed. We talk about the character. You've got to have a character, so you've got to have some imagination. But the most important thing is you've got to know what a page looks like. And you will never acquire that without reading.
Yes, and I'm sure you agree that one of the main things in writing is to write about something you know about. You know, you,
Yes, although there are arguments about that, you do have to have a premise knowledge in anything you're writing, but you don't have to restrict yourself to your own knowledge base. There are a lot of really great writers who go outside their knowledge base and they do it through research. You can't fake it. You've
oh,
got
yeah,
to get heavily
absolutely.
involved in the research if you're going to go that route. And of course, it's going to flow very easily if it's a topic you already know about. So that's a great place to start.
Well, you're perfectly correct. Don't know what I would do with if I didn't have the the computer for the research part
No,
of it all.
I don't know how writers used to do it. I think they used to belong largely to the wealthier class, the leisure class, who could travel and experience and do all these things easily because they had the money and the time. But for those of us now who are struggling along in our little garrets, the internet is just a godsend.
Oh, it sure is. I know as when I've often tell students of mine that when I was doing my doctorate degree and working on my dissertation, I was sending the questions on card stock, and they punch out whatever the magic was with the computer people, and it was sent to Syracuse University. Would go into a machine that was as large would go into a machine that was as large as a building.
Oh, I
You
know.
know, this
I'm old
generic
enough to
machine.
remember, and I'm old enough to remember buildings, entire work buildings that were kept at a cold temperature, and we all had to work in the cold because the computer room had to be kept at a certain temperature in order to protect the mainframes. And it was just like, what would we say? We would say something like Lost in Space or something like that, or the very, very old Doctor Who's, or, it really was like that, and cards would have to be fed into these things. It's just wild. Anyway, Thom, thank you so much for joining me today on Dead to Rights. I really appreciate it. And just stay on the line for a moment, but I just want to thank you first. And it's really great talking to you.
Well, it's my pleasure. In fact, I'm very, very, very pleased that you asked me, and I'm sorry if I rattled on. Once I
Yeah,
get rolling,
it's just very interesting. I try to get writers from all different backgrounds and all different ways to come, as long as they write mystery, because I think it's good for our listeners who are both readers and writers to know the diversity that there is amongst we writers. And everybody look for Thomas Bennett, Bennett, on Amazon. Look for his novels and for his short story collections, and tell him that Donna sent you. Now, I just say, sorry.
I was just going to jump in there. I just go into the writer's name of Thom, Thom,
Okay.
Thom Bennett.
Thank you for correcting that. That's perfect. So Thom Bennett, that's a little easier probably to find because, you know what Amazon's like. It's just a real snake pit to find anybody.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking for me on Kindle, they have all my books together. There's about 6 of them there. And but if you look on just for books, hardcover books or softcover books, they've got me in several different areas. So good luck.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm sure they will be able to find you. I want to thank Thom Bennett for joining us today on Dead to Rights, the podcast video for the crime genre industry. It was great having you on, Thom, and I hope that you'll continue to tune in. And I hope our listeners will tune in next week when we'll be bringing you an interview with Madonna Scaff, who is a new writer on the crime scene and has a terrific new series out, which is highly critically acclaimed. So please join us, and that's Madonna Scaff next week. The following week, we'll be speaking with author Joan O'Callaghan, who also happens to be a very dear friend of mine. So she's got a lot to say. She has taught English teachers throughout her career at OISE and knows an awful lot about the writing industry. So please join us for Joan O'Callaghan in 2 weeks. And I also want to send out my thanks, as always, to our son, Ted Carrick, talented musician and composer and producer, and he provided the theme song for Dead to Rights, Eyes of Gold, which is coming up right now. Thank you, and hope to see you next week.
Dusty road, man alone. His vital signs go on hold, and I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides, let it ride.